So I've made 2 videos now revisiting some of Fortnite's most nerfed weapons, so it only feels right that I make a video revisiting some of Fortnite's most buffed weapons. These are those weapons that with an update or two went from being kind of mid, pretty bad to being very good weapons. And thank you to everybody who commented this idea. There were a bunch of you, so you know who you are. Thank you for that. And before the video starts, I do want to mention that this list will only be including weapons and items, no mechanics. So a lot of people commented like big pots and medkits because you can now move while healing with them. That is a mechanic. That is not just a buff to the big pot or the medkit. That is all healing items, so it will not be on this list. If you enjoy this video, be sure to give it a like and use code TYFRYZ in the Fortnite item shop. But with all that being said, let's just get right into this. So when I had the idea for this video, the first weapon that came to my head was the Infantry Rifle. And this weapon didn't get a change to its damage. It didn't get a change to fire rate or reload speed or any of that. Well, I guess that's kind of a lie. It actually launched doing 41, 43, and 45 damage. Now it does 36, 38, and 40, I believe. But there's a good reason for that. The fundamental way that this weapon plays was completely changed when this weapon was converted to hit scan. Yes, like you absolutely used to have to lead your shots with this weapon. It was like the lever action rifle, if you even know what that weapon is. It's so irrelevant, so bad. It was literally exactly like that. Nobody would use the infantry rifle. It was just too difficult to use, and the damage was not high enough to, I don't know, get lucky if you would hit one shot out of a whole clip, because you had to literally lead your bullets. And again, there was no scope, no nothing back in the game at this time. But this thing instantly became one of the best assault rifles in the game when it was converted to hit scan. You started to see pros, especially like Mongrel, using the purple and legendary tier infantry rifle in late game. They fundamentally changed the way that this weapon worked, and it was a massive buff. I honestly can't even believe that this thing launched at hit scan, but I'm just glad that it's not like that anymore, and it's the way that it should have been at launch. Next, let's talk about the Striker Pump Shotgun. This is an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people will see this one coming. So the Striker Pump Shotgun has a really interesting story, right? Because when it launched in Chapter 3 Season 1, it was pretty mid, I would say. Like, I would say when it launched, it was a definitively worse version than the Pump Shotgun. But then after a string of updates, it became almost on par with just the regular Pump Shotgun that we all know and love. First of all, they increased the fire rate by 0.05, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. The fire rate increased from 0.6 to 0.65, and with a Pump Shotgun, you guys know every second is so useful, and it helped that kind of clunky feeling that a lot of people felt when this shotgun launched, because a lot of people were just used to using the regular Pump Shotgun, and it messed up a bunch of timings. Because if I remember correctly, the fire rate on this weapon was slower than the regular pump. It also got an accuracy increase and then a massive damage increase in Chapter 3 Season 2. Listen to this. The damage in, of course, Ascending Rarity went from 86, 91, 96, 100, and 105 to 103, 108, 114, 120, and 126. That's about a 20 damage increase in damage for a shotgun, which is almost really unheard of. I mean, think about it, right? The legendary version is doing 126 damage. The legendary Spaz does what, 110, I think? Now, I won't be comparing it directly to the Spaz because they did add a max damage cap of 185, so there was no potential for one-shot headshotting. But in my opinion, a 20 damage buff on a shotgun, increasing the fire rate and increasing the accuracy, is all a massive buff and one of the largest buffs we've ever seen on a weapon, particularly a shotgun. All right, let's talk about one that was actually featured surprisingly in my video about revisiting some of Fortnite's biggest nerfs of all time. That's the Deagle. And yeah, I won't spend a ton of time here because I really elaborated on this in that video. And let's be honest, right? We all know what I'm going to say. The Deagle got a huge buff to its structure damage, which let it one-shot walls. If I remember correctly, I don't have the stats pulled up in front of me, but it was above 150 HP, and that's the biggest difference. Because not only did that let you one-shot a fully built wood wall, but it would also let you to one-shot the brick and metal walls that were just being built, right? And so you had about a 4 or 5 second grace period before you were no longer able to one-shot those brick and metal walls. I mean, I can't understate how big of a buff this was. This thing became a pocket heavy sniper. Everybody was running this thing with a pump shotgun. Like, when I say everybody, it was all over the place. But of course, shortly after, it got nerfed, and now it is the Deagle that we really know today. So there's not really a point in spending so much time on this, but there's no doubt that for that like small time period, it was a huge buff and it was a great pistol. Next, let's talk about the Slurp Juice. This is one that a ton of you guys commented on my comment section, and I would entirely agree. And let's be honest with you, the Slurp Juice was kind of overhyped when it was launched. It only gave you 25 health and 25 shield per use. I mean, think about it. That's a pizza slice nowadays. And the community was really calling for a rework on the Slurp Juice, and oh my god, that is exactly what happened. I mean, this heal literally went from being one of the worst healing items in the game to probably the best of all time. And before I go into like specific numbers, let me just say something. Even though this was a legendary item, this thing in Chapter 4, Season 3 felt like it was everywhere. I mean, I remember there were times where I was holding 4 Slurp Juices at a time. It would heal 3 health and shield every single second up to 120. I mean, I can't even fathom how strong that is. Just think about that. You were able to stack them. I mean, if you were in the middle of a fight, just kind of hide in a corner for like half a second, pop a Slurp Juice, and it was just insane. Everybody was using these Slurp Juices. If you had one, you were almost unkillable. I mean, think about that. 6 effective health or shield a second. Think about that. It's just one of those things where I can't explain how good it was unless you were there and you actually used it in moments in need. It was absolutely incredible. And probably the most commented item on any of my videos relating to this topic is absolutely Waterbending. And Waterbending launched in a pretty weak state, right? It went from being a really mid-mythic to, after the buff, being arguably the best mythic of all time. I mean, just listen to the buff this thing got. They increased the fire rate by 20%. They increased damage from 22 to 24. They increased the headshot multiplier from 1.25x to 1.5. I'm literally like running out of breath trying to read all the patch notes of all the buffs. They also doubled the projectile speed. I mean, like, I'm like at a loss from words. I mean, this might be the most buffed weapon in Fortnite history. I mean, don't get me wrong. I felt like Waterbending was weak when it launched, and it definitely need a little bit of a boost for people to be incentivized to use it, but not like this. I mean, look, everybody who played in Chapter 5 knows how strong Waterbending was. It was all around the map. It was easy to get. Everybody had Waterbending in their hands. I know when it was for me, I was not using an assault rifle. I was not using an SMG. I would literally run around with Waterbending, a Frenzy Auto shotgun, mobility, and then 2 heals. That's all you needed to do. Not only do I think it went from being bad to being one of the best mythics of all time, it might be the best item in Fortnite history, and that is saying a lot. There have been hundreds. The gameplay will speak for itself. This probably takes the cake, honestly. But you can't cut any of these weapons out because something like the semi-auto sniper also received a massively important buff. I don't know, right? In my opinion, I felt like the semi-auto sniper was always one of the weaker snipers that we had ever seen. I felt like it was always below the bolt action sniper. You can ask anybody in those early chapters of Fortnite, really, would you rather take a bolt or a semi-auto sniper? It was always the bolt action. And that's because the bolt action did one huge thing that the semi-auto sniper did not. That is that it one-shot headshotted opponents. It did over 200 damage on a headshot. And the semi-auto sniper did not, right? I mean, to me, it'll never make sense why you can shoot somebody with a sniper rifle in the head and it will not totally end their life. It makes no sense. And I guess the developers at Epic Games felt the same way because they buffed it so that it now one-shot headshot. And yeah, so essentially what they did is they buffed the damage from 75 and 78 to 97 and 101. They also increased the projectile speed by 50%, and they also added a new scope on it. It was more zoomed out and easier to use, in my opinion, at those kind of mid to closer engagements because the scope wasn't so zoomed in. I like it a lot better personally. And the headshot multiplier was 2 times, right? So if you just do your simple math there, 97, 101, you are easily doing over 200 damage in a headshot. And that's huge, right? That's absolutely huge. And now, honestly, I don't think that you would be crazy to make the argument that the semi-auto is one of the best snipers of all time. I think you could even make the argument it's better than the bolt action, which is so crazy for me to say because for 5 or 6 years, the semi-auto was absolutely in the dumpster, but not anymore. This buff saved this weapon. And I guess while we're on the topic of snipers, let's talk about one that has a very similar history to the semi-auto sniper. That's the Hunterbolt action. And it's really almost the same story, right? The Hunterbolt action could not one-shot headshot on launch, and that's awful, right? Especially for a bolt action sniper, right? I guess you would expect it from a semi-auto where you can fire 10 bullets off without reloading, but with the Hunterbolt action, that was not expected. And anytime a one-shot weapon goes from not being a one-shot headshot to now being a one-shot headshot means it absolutely has to be on this list. And just a totally unrelated point here, the Hunterbolt is one of my favorite snipers of all time. I absolutely love this weapon. And that's because of the buff it got. I mean, listen to this. They increased the damage from 81, 86, 90, 95, and 99, which let's just stop right there. A 99 body shot for a bolt sniper in the highest rarity. You couldn't even one shot on somebody who had just 100 white health, not even any shields. That's insane. They ended up buffing it to 90, 95, 100, 105, and 110 damage. So you can now one shot to the body in blue or higher rarities. And this is the big one here. The headshot damage multiplier was increased from 2.0 times to 2.5 times. For example, the green Hunterbolt action sniper doing 95 damage pre-buff, that could not one-shot headshot, but now it absolutely could. So not only did this weapon get a massive buff to its headshot damage, it also got a massive buff to its body shot damage. It became basically a whole new weapon. Oh yeah, and they also increased projectile speed by 50%, which is also always a benefit for a sniper rifle. I mean, I know I've said it so many times in this video, but it's just the case with so many of these weapons. This weapon went from being the worst sniper of all time to, in my opinion, one of the best, at least a top 5 sniper. And my last choice on this list, man, I do not like this weapon. You guys know that, but so many of you guys commented it that I had to put it on this list. It's the Chains of Hades. And this one's a little bit nuanced, so let me get into some numbers. Let me explain. Basically, when the Chains of Hades was added to the game, it was awful. I mean, look, personally, I still don't think it's that good, but when it launched, it was, I mean, unbearably bad. And then it got a slew of buffs that slowly over time made it a lot better. I mean, just listen to this. They increased the damage of the swing effect and the chain throw effect, right? So specifically here, the chain throw went from 30 to 40 damage. But that wasn't the only buff this thing would see to its damage, because in the April 5th hotfix, they increased the Chains of Hades damage in a pretty unique way. So I just told you how it went from 30 to 40 damage. Well, they made it so that the first 2 hits now went from 40 to 55 damage, and then the third, like, final smash attack went from 70 damage to 80 damage, and the chain throw went from 40 to 60 damage. So I'll save you guys the kind of mental anguish here from having to do that math. It went from doing 190 total damage to 250, and obviously anytime you see something eclipse that 200 mark when it previously couldn't do that before, you know why that's so good. Again, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that I absolutely love the Chains of Hades and they became absolutely broken, because that's not the case, but this is a really big buff. To increase 60 damage on a melee weapon is really unheard of. And I think the buff here that really specifically sticks out to me is those first 2 hit damage going from 40 to 55. So when somebody was at 100 white health, no shield, they would survive those first 2 hits previously, pre-buff of course, but after the buff, that would do 110 damage. You would be dead, which made Chains of Hades more difficult to deal with and a lot more scary to deal with, because you had to be careful. If somebody jumped in your box, they took 2 swings, you were done for. Look, I'll be honest with you guys, I threw it on the list because so many of you guys commented it. I don't like this weapon, but I know a lot of you guys do, so to everybody who commented it, rejoice in the comment section. There you go. Alright guys, well, that was my revisitation to some of Fortnite's biggest buffed weapons and items of all time. Let me know in the comment section what you thought about this list. What weapons or items did I miss? Again, let me know, because if you guys comment enough, I will make a part 2 to this video. Thank you to everybody who watched to the end. If you're still listening, thank you. I appreciate it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.